Okay. Hey, everybody. I'm Z. I'm going to be your host for today. And we're going to be having Tori. So before I read off her bio, I'm going to read it on land acknowledgement. So I am currently in Etobicoke, and I acknowledge the land that we are on is on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee, as well as the Wendat people, and is now home to many other diverse communities, such as the Inuit and Métis people. I also acknowledge that Etobicoke is covered by Treaty 13, also known as the Toronto Purchase, the Mississaugas of the Credit. We as a co-op are dedicated to honoring the many Indigenous histories and cultures as we recognize and acknowledge the enduring presence of Indigenous peoples on our land. And so now I'm going to read Tori's bio. So, with more than a decade of experience as a full-time artist, songwriter, and entrepreneur, Tori Hathaway has a unique perspective on the music industry as an artist and as an industry leader. While touring professionally in Canada and the US, Tori studied both music business and audio production at the Berklee College of Music through their online programming from 2013 to 2017. In 2015, Tori became one of the youngest FACTOR Juried Sound Recording recipients to date and was recognized by former Governor General Michaëlle Jean for her work with youth in the community. In 2018, Tori founded the Canadian Musicians Co-operative, where she served as the director of the Emerging Artists Program from 2018 to 2020 and continues to sit on the board of directors as a member advocate. In addition to her work within the music industry, Tori is currently pursuing a PhD at Western University in the Biochemistry department. Thank you so much, Tori, for being here with us and answering all of these awesome questions we're about to get.
Z, thank you so much for having me and spending your Tuesday night here hosting. Very grateful to have you here. So when I was talking with the PD team about the best use of our time here, I typically hold office hours for co-op members every week, once a week, and we tend to have really productive conversations. And I noticed that a lot of people that are able to make it to my office hours tend to start things with like, this is probably a really stupid question, but, or, you know, I is probably like a silly question. And I think that those are the most valuable ones. And I love stupid questions. And so when the PD team and I were talking about what to do, I also had gotten a number of messages that day from people saying that they weren't able to make it my office hours and that time didn't work for them. And so what I thought I might do is during this kind of blocked out time that everybody has, we can have a very specifically, let's talk about some of the things that maybe we need some clarification on. And this is even a really accessible format here, I think, for answering this, because you can take the time to formulate your question and put it into the chat. And then I'll see it in the chat here. So I don't have to say who the question came from or anything like that. But I wanted to have a very specific place for all of the things, all of the questions that have been coming up for you that maybe you just need some clarification on how something works, or and just kind of have like a general open period of time where we can talk about some of the things that feel like stupid questions that I think are actually the most important questions. So this is time for you, and we can go in any direction that you want with this. I don't have anything planned. I have my tablet here so I can draw stuff and do diagrams if we need, but I I know you guys know what the prompt is, no stupid questions Q&A. So I'm hoping that you've had a little bit of time to come up with some questions. And for those watching on YouTube who maybe perhaps aren't in our Zoom call right now or aren't part of the summer emerging artist or pre-professional programs, the current program participants are doing a capstone project of sorts where they're writing a strategic release plan for a specific artist. And so I think that it's kind of a really great time right now where you guys are actively applying all of this information and utilizing what you've learned over the past 8 weeks. You know, perhaps in doing this activity thus far, some things have come up for you and you want to talk about it. You want to talk about strategy. You want to talk about, you know, various things. And so I thought that having this kind of 2-hour block, doing almost a mini office hours of sorts that was then available to the larger public would be really useful. So I guess with that, all that being said, there are no stupid questions. So what are we talking about today? Because the floor is yours. Okay, so we got a couple of questions here already. Perfect. As they come up for you, go ahead and put it in the chat, and maybe we can just Z, maybe you could just like check mark it if I've hit it or something, so I make sure I don't miss any questions. Okay, so first question that comes in here is, how and where do you find inspiration for songwriting? What are your best practices for getting better and getting past the "this is not good enough" phase? Okay, so first things first, how and where do you find inspiration for songwriting? Great question. So I find I actually have two minds of this. When I'm songwriting for me versus when I'm songwriting for somebody else, my process is actually very different. So songwriting is what I use as a way of processing my emotions and understanding how I'm feeling and going through that process. And so my real life tends to be the majority of the inspiration for that, how I'm feeling, what I'm going through, and it's kind of a channel for that. And that tends to happen fairly spontaneously, right? So I get a lot of ideas and inspiration from that becomes a starting place to, you know, either continue to work on myself or take to a co-writer. And then there's also the other side of the coin when, say, I'm going to a co-write with an artist and they have their ideas that they bring to the table. And then that's a different perspective that I'm coming in from. And in that sense, I tend to pull from, you know, my own life experience, but a lot of that is more listening to the other person and reflecting their thoughts back to them. And so I find I'm less a source of inspiration or like digging for inspiration of my own, but more trying to be a soundboard and listen to all of the thoughts and feelings that the artist I'm working with is bringing up, and then perhaps proposing different ways to phrase or communicate those emotions and experiences. So in that co-writing environment, I'm not bringing my own experiences to the table, but I'm reframing and focusing the emphasis differently on their experiences and what they're pulling their inspiration from. So that's kind of two sides of that coin. The second part of your question was, what are your best practices for getting better and getting past the "this is not good enough" phase? Funny you say that. I'm not sure that I've ever gotten past that phase. I very much fall into the perfectionist trap. And I think that's actually a lot to my detriment. Within my artistry, I pushed myself really, really hard all of the time without reprieve. And so I think so practices for getting better, right? Within the context of songwriting or even in general, a lot of this is muscle memory and practice. It's how many hours are you putting in. So, and I think another thing as well, like I'll use songwriting as the example, but then again, it applies to everything. Whenever you start doing something, it's not going to be good. That's just the nature of doing something. When you first start learning how to cook, you're lucky if it's edible, right? It takes time and practice to learn and do things. And the more that you do it, the better you get, the more comfortable you get, the more you're willing to experiment with things because you understand the parameters of the system you're working within better, right? So I think in terms of getting better, you have to be okay with it not being good enough because you know that you're working towards the goal. I think within the context of songwriting, one of the best decisions I ever made as a songwriter was to do the song a day challenge for a year. And I wrote a song every single day for 365 days. And that again was building the muscle memory. Out of 365 songs, 300 of them were absolute garbage. 60 of them were passable and could be turned into something that maybe could be refined with a lot of work. And like 5 of them were good, right? Because it wasn't about writing 365 excellent songs. It was about getting into the practice of sitting down and being intentional about writing and getting into that headspace so that when I was in an environment where I needed to write, right? Especially when you're starting to get into co-writing environments, right? Being able to flip on that switch and turn on that part of your brain is a really important thing. So I think, you talk about that this is not good enough phase. I'm not sure I've ever left that, but I also think that there's a lot of power in accepting this is not good enough, right? But that's okay because this is never going to see the light of day, right? I'm doing it for the sake of doing it and getting better, and I don't have to worry about somebody judging me for it because this is never going to make it outside, my writing journal. So that's kind of my thoughts on that. Hopefully that's helpful. I don't know. Out of the workshops we've done this summer, are there any specific ones you think we should be rewatching throughout the year to make sure it sinks in? I'm assuming that you're referring to the workshops that have happened this year or this summer, for in terms of going back and rewatching. I think that really depends a lot on your goals and where you're at in the process. We try to make these resources be available to you for whenever you'll need it in the future, right? Because a lot of the stuff you're doing right now isn't necessarily directly applicable to your career, but 6 months from now it could be. And so having the resource to be able to go back and watch that video about top line writing, or what is a deal memo, or what do record labels do, having the ability to go back and access whatever you need to whenever that's relevant to you immediately is one of our goals. So it really depends on what your specific goals and trajectory are for what's relevant for you. I signed up for SOCAN late and couldn't find it in my notes, but between ASCAP and BMI, which US representative is more common / recommended? So this is a conversation about, like, a question about performance rights organizations in the US. So ASCAP and BMI are the US equivalents of SOCAN. I don't think that there's one that's better or one that I would recommend. I can tell you that like they do the same thing. It's kind of up to you to go and look at the two organizations and see which one makes the most sense for you to register with. I am registered with ASCAP. That made the most sense for me at the time that I was registering. But I don't think out of those two that there's a bad answer there. You have $300 to promote a single. What do you spend it on? That's a great question. It depends on your goals. So to the person who proposed this question, if they're still here, I can't tell. I think, yeah, they're still here. So my question would be like, the goal being to get as much visibility as possible. So I would probably spend it so first thing I would do, like, get streams. It depends on your demographic. Like $300 can go a long way on social media ads, but ads themselves can be fairly disingenuous depending on your target demographic, depending on the age group that you're trying to get your song in front of. I think a lot of it you don't. Okay, here's what I would do. And this is a little bit broad, stepping a little bit broader beyond the $300. I would be really thoughtful about how I built my social media platform. Let's assume, for the sake of this theoretical $300 situation, it's a target demographic that is relevant for TikTok. I would be really smart in terms of long-term planning to build reliable, engaged followership on TikTok, where I'm getting frequent high engagement. And I wouldn't, this is kind of a controversial take, kind of a real hot take. I don't think in this environment right now it makes a lot of sense to spend money on social media advertising, especially when you're going towards younger demographics. And again, a lot of people will probably disagree with me on this. But I think you can spend that money far more strategically, because you don't need to spend money on social media for social media to be effective. In fact, it can sometimes do more harm than good. I think I'm a huge fan of word of mouth and guerrilla marketing. And so depending on where your target demographic is, if you have some localized group, a thing that I used to do, and this all ties into knowing your target demographic really well. So this is a decision that I made that was really, really effective for me and my demographic. When I released my record almost 10 years ago, holy moly, a lot of the people that were purchasing my records were actually younger kids, like age 8, age like 6 through 10, let's say. So I used to be a fairly prominent street performer in Barrie. I would go out 4 days a week for 3 hours at a time. And it was actually a really, really valuable revenue stream and a way for building a local presence and meeting people that I could then establish a longer term relationship with. So that was actually really important for the progression of my career, was doing street performance multiple days per week, basically from like April through to October. And I noticed younger kids, their family would buy a CD and immediately they would fight over it. And so when because I had like a 3-song EP, and they'd like buy the 3-song EP for like $10, and they would always fight over it. So when we were making the record, I had these booklet inserts made. The record was called Dear Diary. And so we actually made it like a little diary. Like it had like 10 pages that you could flip through, and pretty little pictures and Easter eggs and all of these things in it. And we got like 5,000 extra booklets made independent of the record. So we got records made with the booklet inside, and then we got just like 5,000 extra booklets alone. And what I would do is sell the booklets by themselves for $1. And so a family would buy the CD for like $20, and then they would buy however many extra booklets they need so that each kid had their own booklet. And I could sign a booklet for each kid. And so I think that on that note, when you understand your demographic, being able to invest in something physical that you can actually give away. The other thing we used to do was postcards. So not like a business card, but a postcard that had like a photo or something and like social media info, and then a space on the back that I could like write something and sign it for them. Ended up being really, really, really popular, and we would give them away for free. And so that $300, what I would actually do is like get something made with the single on it that you can sign the back of or the front of or something when you're going and doing physical shows, physical support, when you're doing publicity. Because you shouldn't like, and that's not to say you shouldn't be investing in your social media. Absolutely do that. I don't think you need to spend money on social media. So you should be able to do all of your publicity and support for a single on social media without having to pay for it. And I would use that $300 to go to a print shop, an unnamed, non-specific, non-sponsored print shop, and get like a little postcard or something made that has like the graphic design for the single and where to find you, maybe even a QR code to like download the free demo or like an acoustic version or something like that you can sign and give away. Because people don't keep business cards, but when you sign something for them and say like, to so and so, here's like a little message, and actually sign it, then that becomes a keepsake for them. And I think that that's a much more effective use of $300 because people are going to keep that. I even had it was so cool. There is a member of our team, of our production team, that came up to me at Showcase on Friday after the show and was like, you came to my school, like my elementary school, like 8 years ago, and gave me a postcard, and I still have it in my bedroom. And I was like, that's so cool. You could have thrown it out years ago. I don't matter at all. Like, it's not worth anything. But that's like, I think that kind of proves my point a little bit, that it's still really cool to have that keepsake, right? For whatever it was, because it was a postcard. It cost me like a cent to make, because we would large batch them. And I used to go to these places, and every single show that I did, I waited in a meet and greet line, and everybody walked away with a signed postcard. Remember once I played, I think it was Creedmoor Children's Festival, and the line took like 3 hours to clear for the meet and greet because there were all these little kids who wanted a postcard. And so after the set, it was like on the family stage at like 2 p.m. But because I was willing to stay for all these families, even people who didn't see the show lined up and got a postcard. And then I had people, to this day have people saying like, look what I just found, and like tag me on Instagram. I've even had a few artists in past years who was like, look what I found under my bed. Apparently we met before. So weird connections, but that's what I would spend $300 on, because I find that actually, in terms of conversion and engagement, for that is so much more effective than spending $300 on an Instagram ad for a week. And those are my thoughts on that. There are so many things that need to be done to have a working music career. Do you have any advice for being able to manage it all? I tend to get really overwhelmed with all the things that you need to be thinking about, looking for, and doing. Oh, yeah, it is overwhelming. It's a lot. Okay, so yes, a few things that worked really well for me were I took notes for everything all the time, and I kept them all. Every single meeting, every single workshop, every single little thing I made notes for. And now that you can just do that all digitally, that's super useful. That's one thing. I think that trying to stay on top of things so that they don't build up is also really useful. Like, think about like SOCAN registrations, right? Like taking the minute and a half it takes to register it right away after you finish a co-write. Otherwise, you're going to end up with like suddenly you have 150 songs that you have to upload, and that's going to take days, and that gets really overwhelming over time. So like not sitting on things, I think, is a big one. I think trying to build in good infrastructure systems and habits that you don't have to think about. So, and trying to optimize every single part of the process. Like, I even think about like when I was actively gigging, I had like a cubby at the front door, and like my amp went to a specific spot, my guitar went to a specific spot, my cable bag went to a specific spot, the merch box went to a specific spot. And it was always like there was a routine for everything. Every single thing that we did had a locked in routine. And no matter what, everything went in the same place. We set up everything the exact same way. We built a routine that worked really, really well. And that's not just for like going to gigs and coming back, but for everything that we did. There was almost like an SOP of sorts. Standard operating procedure is what that means, by the way. To follow, to make sure, and then again, that muscle memory kicks in, so you don't even have to think about it. I think that would be one of the things. And also, like, a lot of this comes with time and with practice, so not being too hard on yourself as well is an important part of this, because you're not going to have it all perfectly right away. And keep all of your receipts also. I had like a little, not like a duotang, but whatever it was, it had the little flippy thing, and then there were all like the little sections inside, and I would like alphabetize receipts as I received them and then process them at the end of every month. And then we got to a point that I had like for the bookkeeping software that I used, they had an app where like literally as soon as we had an expense, we could take a picture of the receipt. And then I still kept on to that. So like trying to, as you grow and start doing more things, build habits so that you can deal with stuff as it comes and it doesn't build up, I think, is the biggest thing. Do you need to co-write? No, nobody's making you. You can do whatever you want. I think that there's a great benefit to co-writing. because you build connections, establish relationships with so many other people in the community. And those like sacred relationships. My co-writers, it's like a special kind of soul bond that you develop with the co-writers that you really enjoy working with, that you really cherish. And I found so much value in co-writing, because you get a different perspective. People, like, every single time I'm in the room getting the opportunity to write with somebody who's a better writer than me, I'm thrilled because I learn so much from them every single time. And so I don't think there's any downside to co-writing, other than the fact that you're giving up, a percentage of the rights there, right? You're having to split that. But I think if the song ends up much better for it, it's worth it every single time. So you don't need to co-write. You don't need to do anything. But I don't think that there's a downside that outweighs the huge benefits. Do you think that being at 200 followers or less on social media is too little to release music when paying for it on your own? Well, I guess here's my thought here. Again, it all comes back to, what are your goals? I know I'm sounding like a broken record here, but if you're making a record for you to be happy and feel good about what you do, and it doesn't matter who else hears it, no, it doesn't matter at all. You can do whatever you want. I think that if you're making a record, though, to sell as a product, right, and you're going to leverage it as an asset to build other opportunities and do those things, if you're at the point where you have 200 followers, is that, like, it's not even about the social media count. I think, are you at a point where making a record makes sense? Would be the question that I would leave you with. I don't think that social media followers have anything to do with it. Because at the same time, would you rather have 10,000 followers and have 10 of them actually care about what you're doing? Or would you rather have 200 followers where 200 of them care about what you're doing? Right? The follower number doesn't count. So many people buy followers all of the time. Nobody cares about that. What we care about is your engagement. Right? When you post something, even if you have 10,000 followers, are you getting 5 likes? Right? Or are you getting 1,000? Right? How many comments are you getting? Are you commenting back? Are you engaging with those people? Right? Engagement is so much more valuable than followership. And so jumping back to the thought I kind of, the tangent I started going down, there is a right time to make a record for the goal that you have. If you're spending your own money on it and you're going to make a record that's half decent, that's going to be expensive, right? Even if you do all of the production yourself. Are you doing all of the productions yourself? Are you playing all of the instruments yourself? Are you doing all the graphic design yourself? Are you making the CDs physically yourself? If the answer is not yes to every single one of those, it's going to be expensive. Right? Even if you say, okay, I'm going to record it all myself, you still need a graphic designer. Right? Like, this is expensive, right? Even to send it to a distributor, that costs money. Right? So, and I think for most of us, we want to make something good that represents us well. Right? So I think the better question would be, like, is 200 enough? I would say, where do I need to be at in my career? And it's so much bigger of a question than how many followers do I have, right? It's, where are you in your career with what you're doing, where an album, you can leverage that effectively, where the asset itself justifies the cost of the creation of the asset. I know you guys can't talk in here and have it come out, but does that make any sense at all? Can I get like a thumbs up or like a thumbs up? Okay. Cool. I'm okay. Hopefully that's making sense. It's weird not being able to like have like a conversation about this, but that's part of how we have to live stream it. So that would be my thought on that. And if I don't answer your question properly, or if you have a follow-up question, feel free to like just like add a follow-up in the chat as well. We have time. Okay. How do you deal with criticism, both constructive and negative, in your career? Excellent question. I love feedback. To the point that it bothers people when I'm like, tell me what I need to fix. Tell me what I need to fix. Give me more, like, I want you to tear holes in this. I want you to rip me to shreds. Like, so that I can be better. I've always kind of always begged for more feedback on how I could improve, to the point that it pisses a lot of people off. But at the same time, negative criticism sucks. And if you're receiving that, I'm really sorry, because that's really hard, especially when it's your art, right? And it's who you are, and it's an expression of yourself. Having people not like that it can be really difficult. And so I just want to take a moment to recognize that sucks. And I'm sorry that that's happening to you. Nobody likes to be judged. And so this is definitely one of the harder parts of being an artist and making something that's an expression of yourself, right? And who you are and what you believe in and your experiences and your feelings, and then putting it out there into the world and having people go, that sucks. That's so bad. In terms of that, I tend to, like, my go-to is I ask myself, well, where is this feedback coming from? Right? Like, is this somebody that I care what they think? You know? Is it some random commenter on YouTube who doesn't even have like their name? It's like user 0879512. There's so I really love Brene Brown's books, and I know that that's like a white woman book club, everybody makes fun of it sort of things, but I actually got a lot of really valuable stuff out of that. And there's something that she said in one of her books that was like, doing this work is inherently incredibly vulnerable, right? And that's why criticism, we take it so harshly, because we are putting ourselves in a vulnerable position where we can be judged, right? And so what she said in the book is like, I'm getting in the ring, I'm putting the gloves on, and I'm fighting out there, I'm doing the work. And if you're a person who is standing in the sidelines saying that I'm not doing it right, I don't care for your opinion. If you want my, like, if I'm going to take your feedback and actually process it and let it hold any weight, you better be in that ring with me. And I'm not communicating it well, but that is something that I always really took to heart in what she's saying. So like, I'm in the ring doing the work, I'm fighting for my life out here. And if you want to tell me how I'm doing it wrong, you better come in and show me. Because shouting it from the sidelines, I don't care to hear what you have to say. The same as like, I don't know, like when you see people like yelling at people playing sports on the TV when they've like never picked up a hockey stick or like a football in their life. saying that they could do it better? Probably not. Probably not. So I think about where the feedback is coming from and whether there's any credibility to it at all in the first place. And if there is, right? Like if it is somebody who's been in the ring and who has experience and is knowledgeable, right? I would say, where is that coming from? Right? And what can I take away from this? So I don't know if that helps. Let me know if that helped. And if not, I'm sorry, and I can try and tackle that question another way. When you did your street performances, what did your sets look like? Did you play in the same areas with the same music? Okay, so what did my sets look like? I had like 10 songs that I knew went really well over. I had like 5 covers and 5 original songs that I knew always really played well. And I like, the nice thing about doing street performance is that you have a constantly cycling crowd. So you don't have to have 3 hours worth of material. You can have the songs that you know do really well. And so I would kind of cycle through those. And then I also used it as an opportunity to test new material out. So before I would ever play a song anywhere else, I would play it there and see how it felt actually singing it live and see what kind of reactions I would get. To kind of test material out. Cover songs as well. Before I would ever consider playing a cover song in any kind of show, I would actually kind of do like a test with the audience I had there to see if it played over well. And you learn new things actually when you do the same songs. Things about those songs change over time. So here's a little funny story. So my goodness, this was again like 10 years ago. I used to play I Knew You Were Trouble by Taylor Swift because that tended to do really, really, really well with my audiences. And there was a point where, and like this was when I was going into schools, like elementary schools, and playing shows and doing workshops with kids that were in grades 3 through 8. So I used to play this song, and around this time, so I'd had it in my repertoire for like a year, right? And it was always a go-to. It always went over super, super well. Everybody would sing along. Like it is always just killed, right? It was my like mid-set boost that I needed to get us over like the middle of the set hurdle. And one day I was at this school and I was playing this song, and all of these kids just started screaming out of nowhere. And I was so confused. I'd been playing this song for a year. I had no idea what was happening. I was deeply confused. I don't know if you guys remember this, but there was that meme that came out with that song that was a goat screaming. Ah, ah, trouble, trouble, trouble. If that recalls your memory at all. I see some heads nodding. It's coming back to you now. Okay, well, that meme hit the internet like 2 days before that show, and I hadn't seen it yet. And so this song that I'd been playing for a year, no problem, to like 4th graders, all of a sudden I had a gymnasium of small children going, ah, ah, out of nowhere, all perfectly coordinated with each other. And it threw me off so hard. I was like, I didn't, and I was so confused. And I was street performing the next day, and there was this like group of little kids again, and they did the same thing. And I was like, what the hell is going on? I don't understand it. And so I kind of wrote it off. And then it happened again the next day when I was like doing the street performance. And so I actually at the end of it, I was like, hey, so what's that from? What are you doing there? What's going on with that? And they were like, oh, there's this meme. And they showed it to me on their little iPod Touch. And then I understood. And I actually ended up about a month later having to take that song out of my rotation because the kids got way too riled up with it. And then I couldn't get the room back because it just threw things way off kilter and I had to replace it with another song. So I don't remember what the question was at all. What did your street performance look like? What did your sets look like? Oh, okay. So there's that. Another trick that I had at the time that I was doing this a lot, I had a soft shell case, and that is really lousy for tips, like a guitar case. I had like a fabric case. And so we actually got like this old busted guitar case and we modded it so that it had like a thing to hold CDs and stuff like that, and like a thing that we could keep tips in. And got a separate case for that. Like, and it was like a hard shell case that we put weights in so that stuff wouldn't fly away. So that's another tip. I always brought a chair because I was doing 3-hour sets in the hot sun. Some days I would go much longer. Like whenever there was a festival going, like I often went for like 12, 14 hours. Because the money was really good. Like Canada Day one year, like 2016 or something like that, I made like $1,200. So it was worth doing it. So I always brought a chair, even if I didn't use it, because I found it was really important for maintaining my stamina. I did like a talk at the beginning of the summer on one of these Tuesday nights about like what did that look like. So using the amp positioning, I tried to put myself behind something flat, like a wall. I tried to put myself right up against a wall so people couldn't cut behind me. And when they built Meridian Place, because believe it or not, I started busking many years before they built Meridian Place. There was like a tree that I would stick myself under that was like perfect. And even when they did, I tried on the actual like stage at Meridian Place a couple times, but I was so far away from the foot traffic that it didn't make sense for tips. So I much prefer to be out with the people than in a place that's like the stage. I find it's way more effective for tips. So you want to get like right up where people are with active change. So there's an ice cream stand in Barrie that's right on the waterfront in the marina. I kind of like stick myself right there. So all the people standing with change gonna buy ice cream would always throw some in there. So it's like positioning was a really important factor there. And I had like 2 go-to spots with that. So ice cream stand I always went to, and then in front of Meridian Place, right on the corner there, on Dunlop Street, I would stick myself right at a corner of one of the buildings so that people couldn't go behind me, so that if they were walking past Meridian Place on that side of Dunlop, they would have to go right past me. So that was a big part of it. If you could only choose one, would you invest in radio promotion or playlist promotion or streaming? I wouldn't invest in radio promotion. It's not lucrative and you have to be totally positioned right to get it. And even then it's not really worth it in my opinion. Now that's terrestrial radio. CBC is fantastic. Right now in this current time, I'd probably go for playlist, but make sure that you do it right, because there are a lot of scammy playlist people. Now, I'll be the first to say I am not incredibly well versed in the playlisting process because I am from the before times more so. And the time when I was actively releasing music, playlisting wasn't a thing. Like I'm a country musician because folk was like bluegrass, and my options were being a pop artist, a country artist, or a children's music artist. And the closest one was country. Like singer-songwriter didn't exist as a genre. Like you couldn't choose that. Spotify didn't exist. It wasn't a thing. So with the really important caveat that I am not incredibly well versed in the world of playlisting, based on what I know about it, I'd probably focus on that. And that kind of goes hand in hand with streaming. Streaming is kind of a necessity in this day and age. Would love a more physical example. A physical example of what, Jules? If you could just type in the thing, if you're still here. Perhaps you're not. Okay. As an emerging artist with only live performance experience right now, what would you say are the next steps after the summer programming is over? What can I do while still being a member of the co-op to further my career? Well, I think the whole hope of this program is to equip you with the knowledge and the skills to be able to continue on this path in a sustainable manner. So, and I know this doesn't exist now, but like one of the things I used to do when I was the director of this program was we had a social media component. And so getting folks in the habit of posting consistently every day so that when the program ended, they were already comfortable with doing things like that. So I would say like right now, what are you actively doing over the summer to support your artistry? Practicing every day. Right? Like attending workshops, being thoughtful, working on your website, working on your EPK, building assets, collaborating with other people, right? Like being really intentional and engaged in your own career and actually doing the thing rather than talking about it, right? My hope is that if you have fully maximized your opportunity in this program this summer, you will have built up a lot of momentum and a lot of muscle memory in doing these things. And so my hope is that when we remove the scaffold of the summer emerging artist or 3P program, you'll continue doing those things. And now hopefully you've learned in the workshops that you've attended why these things are important, right? So hopefully, we've equipped you with the knowledge to know that to be able to book shows, you have to have a website and an EPK, because that's not for your fans, that's for industry, right? To be able to get like if you're going to conferences, if you're trying to get like showcasing opportunities, you have to have those assets, right? And all of the stuff that you've learned, right? Like that, and have been actively applying, that you continue to do those things. Because now you don't have an excuse. Before you could say, well, I don't know how to do any of it. I can't do that anymore. The only thing stopping you is yourself. And so keep doing the thing. It would be my thoughts. Singing while people are screeching at you must be wild. Yes, it was incredibly bizarre. It was, I was so confused, kind of freaked out. Okay. Has anyone ever told you anything that completely changed the way you look at things, music related? Yes, all the time. I think One of the most pivotal ones was the day that I fully came to terms with the fact that how everybody else in this industry viewed me was as like a Barbie doll in a box on a shelf. Like I made my art for me, and it was like a really important part of who I am and how I engaged with the world and how I expressed myself. But the vast majority of people that were not artists that I engaged with treated me and viewed me as some like equivalent to a Barbie on the shelf. And I had to understand their perspective to be able to interface with it in a way that worked for me and to accomplish my own goals. I think that was a really powerful thing that kind of changed my perspective on everything forever. That music is just the thing that we're selling, but it's not even music, it's actually you. Like, because people listen to your music and they like your music, but they care about you. And that's a really hard thing because you are the product, you, the person, the human being, are the thing that is being sold and commodified. And that's kind of freaky. So that changed my perspective forever. Other things, I think there's another thing that comes to mind. I had a fellow songwriter explain to me once that people will always go for a songwriter artist over just an artist because they want the well, not the water. And so it was at that point that I really, really dug into honing in my songwriting skills, not just for myself, but for other artists, because you are the source of the goods that are the thing that keeps this entire industry functioning. Without songs, there is no music industry. And so being the person that makes that, you're incredibly valuable. They can get any artist to sing your song. If you can only sing, you can easily be replaced. And sure, there are a bunch of songwriters, but they can take a person who is a good singer and they can dress them up and tell them how to walk on stage and give them media training and turn them into an artist. And this happens all the time. Industry plant, hello. But they can't conjure good songs out of nowhere. And so to build a place of permanence in this industry, to have job security, being a really strong songwriter is the way that you make sure that you can have some stability in your craft and in your career. So, because you're the well, not the water. The water can't exist without you. And so I think that was another thing that was really powerful. Okay, caffeine break. If there was one mistake you could fix from your music career, what would that be? Holy cow. That you guys are cutting me deep. Yeah, absolutely. So the reason that I am in front of you here today and not spending my time on stage still doing stuff is because I can't anymore. There was a point in my life when I was in high school full-time, in college full-time, and working full-time. So it was nuts. And I pushed myself way too hard because I thought that I had to. And I got really, really sick. I damaged my lungs permanently, and it ended my career. That's the biggest mistake that I made. I didn't pace myself at all. I pushed myself way too hard, and I paid for that with my entire future. And now I'm a biochemist. So, and that's great. Don't get me wrong. Following a different passion I have in life, but it is my own fault. And I wouldn't change it. Actually, now that if I could fix a career, I wouldn't change it, because I think that, like, if that hadn't happened to me, this organization wouldn't exist. And I think that I can do a lot more good in the world spending my time here with all of you. But if I hadn't put myself in the position where I put my success over my health and my well-being, I wouldn't have lost it all. And that was a really hard thing to reckon with. So that's what I would have done differently. If I could have still had this too, I think I would have calmed down a little bit and been not so hard on myself, and made sure that I was making decisions that were sustainable. Because it turns out, funny enough, getting 3 hours of sleep a night and spending 287 nights a year in a hotel and sleeping for the odd half hour here and there in the car in between cities is not sustainable. So I think that's why I preach about not pushing yourself into a position where you can't just recover next week, because sometimes you can't. Sometimes you end up in liver failure, actively dying, and then have your lungs messed up forever. So learn from my mistake and take good care of yourself, because that is truly the most important thing in life. Okay. With that reckoning of my internal axes, best snacks for street performance. I didn't used to eat during street performances. I didn't tend to really eat before or during performances. I was just water all the way. Like during like a 3-hour street performance shift, I wasn't eating snacks. I guess probably you don't want to be too messy, would be my thought. That's like your spot now. Oh, at the ice cream stand? Yeah, it has history. Sometimes I've had a long day of getting things done and feel really exhausted. I'll still have things to get done that have deadlines, but I have the same schedule each week, so it's not like I will have extra free time. How do you know when you're pushing yourself too hard, or if you need to learn to push through those tired moments? If you figure that out, let me know. Because, dude, same. I think over the years I've built up some strategies for this, but it's still something I'm very much working on. I think it comes down to priorities, right? There are only so many hours in the day, so what are the things that you can afford to let go? What are the concessions that you can make? What are the non-negotiables that have to be put first, and what else doesn't fall into that? And if there are more things that have to get done than you can do, what resources do you have access to provide support for that? I find, and I don't know about you, but I often find myself relying on myself for everything. I'm really, really bad at asking for help. But I've often ended up in a position where I didn't have a choice or stuff wouldn't get done. And funny enough, that's why we have a PD department. That's, why we have so many people here at this organization working tirelessly to do these things, because I tried to do it all myself. In 2019, the team, we had an HR person, we had a communications person, and an IT person, and me. So, and I was doing, like, in 2018, 2019, I taught every single lecture that we had. And so it's, as things grow, you have to learn how to ask for help. So I would look at all of the things on your list and say, where can I ask for help? I think also jumping back to the previous thing of trying to build muscle memory and routine and systems so that you can deal with things as they come up, so they don't accumulate and have to take up a spot on the to-do list. And trying to automate some of those processes. How do I go about building a band? Where can I look for and hire musicians? It comes back to, what is the band for? So I think a great place to start. So when I need players, I ask my friends that are musicians for referrals. A lot of this industry functions on a referral system. So that's probably, you start by having a band with your friends, right? And then sometimes some of them stick around, sometimes you outgrow them. I often found myself using, so Hayden, who is a very important member of our team, and also sits on the board of directors. He was my guitar player for like a decade. And we kind of brought him up, right? So it's also, when you're an artist earlier in your career, it can be advantageous to find somebody who looks like they have a lot of talent and promise, but not a lot of experience, and kind of shepherd them. I've found a lot of success with that. So that, like, pretty much everything functions on a referral system. And on that note, for the people who want to be hired to do stuff, a really important thing to do is go out and play with people and be in places. I think that people would love for stuff to happen for them and to them without them having to do anything. I think if there's one thing that you need to take away, that is the difference between being successful and not being successful in the industry, is being there, right? So, like, being successful in this industry is a combination of right time, right place, right person. And if you put yourself in a room, like, it's a matter of, do you go to 1,000 places? right? Or do you go to one place? The likelihood of being in the right place at the right time with the right person increases dramatically the more places that you go to, right? So every single opportunity that you have to go to a workshop in the community, a writer's night, a battle of the bands, a jam session, a workshop, right? We are so lucky in Canada to have access to so many resources as musicians and as creators, right? Like there's Music Ontario, NSAI, Songwriters Association of Canada, SOCAN, like FACTOR, MMF, so many things. So many organizations exist to provide you with education and resources and networking opportunities. And so many artists don't invest the time in that, right? Like I used to go to everything. SOCAN AGMs, super useful. Go to them. Take the drive. It's worth it, right? Like date with a demo nights, all of these things, every single possible thing that you could go to where there will be other musicians there, other music industry people, go to all of them. Shake as many hands as you can. Increase the chances of being with the right person in the right room at the right time. Because this industry is, sure, it's a combination of talent and luck, but it's also about persistence. And so the more persistent you are, the more lucky you will be. Now I'm getting ranty. Sorry about that. What's the number one biggest piece of advice you could give anyone in the music industry, no matter whether you are a musician, producer, etc.? Take everything that you hear from every single person with a big old grain of salt. Everybody has unique experiences and perspectives that is shaped by, their own process and their own personal interests. And the only person who completely 100% has your back and your best interest at heart is you. Never assume that anybody is doing anything out of the goodness of their heart. A lot of people get completely screwed over by doing that. So always have your own back. Best to assume the best, prepare for the worst. I think that's probably the biggest thing. Have you gotten any of your music into media? Some. Like, I don't have any music in movies or anything, but a couple of commercials. Yeah, there's been some stuff. Not anything super prominent though. Nothing that could like pay a mortgage. Do you have any advice or suggestions for someone that works full time and is still trying to pursue a music career? What are gigs that maybe aren't as artistic to do to get to a place where someone doesn't have to work an additional full-time job? I find the pay the bills gig so creatively taxing. Oh yeah. I think the biggest thing is like use the tools that you have available to you to expedite this process. I find like so many people are not capitalizing on the power of things like TikTok and make things unnecessarily hard on themselves. Understand how this industry works and invest the time that you have wisely, right? So rather than continuing to play bar gigs for $100 and a free beer. Take the few hours that it takes to build a really strong EPK so that you can get better gigs that pay you more. So you end up, you don't have to work as many gigs per week to make the same amount of money, right? Like use your knowledge of this industry to invest the time that you do have wisely to improve everything else in your environment. Because I have this conversation and not with anybody in this room, but the amount of times that I've had a conversation with an artist that started with, well, I really want to figure out how I can quit my day job and just do this music thing full time. And I go, well, what are you doing to build your actual artist career? Like, what would that look like, you being full time? And they go, oh, I'll spend all day in the studio and writing. It's like, so how do you get there? Right? Like, what's the difference between here and now? How are you going to sustain that there? Where's the money going to come from there? People are going to buy my stuff. Great. Where are they? Right? So you have to look at what being a full-time musician looks like, where you are now, and then what the difference is between those two scenarios, and ask yourself, how do I get to the point where I'm able to sell enough tickets to a live show to pay my rent? You have to have a fan base to do that. So how do you build the fan base? Well, you can go and play a bunch of shitty bar gigs, right? Or you can also just use the time more wisely, find them on social media, build the connections with them there so that they'll actually buy a ticket when you book that bigger gig, right? Invest the time in making the EPK so that when you reach out to that guy, that booking agent, right? Or whoever, you can give them something so that they'll actually book the venue where you can sell the tickets. So I think there's like, use the time that you have wisely. Don't keep spinning your wheels in the same place. Figure out what the final destination is, and then figure out how to get your tires out of the mud. And practically, I think what that looks like is like a lot of people just don't have the EPK, don't have the website. Where's the booking agent going to go? Where's the promoter going to go to find out whether you're worth their time or not? You know? So, and a big part of that is like, what is the, so, and I think another piece of advice, jumping back to the previous question, would be that the smartest way to play this game in the music industry is to constantly ask yourself, what's in it for them? Right? Like, because the reality of the situation is we're in a glorified like sales position. You are selling yourself, right? So like constantly ask yourself, what does this other person want to get out of it? What do they need? How can I adjust this situation to accommodate their needs? How can I make their life easier? You'll get a lot further with that. And then you can anticipate what they need, right? A booking agent, or let's say bar owner. The bar owner at the venue. You want to play at venue X, bar owner. What is their objective? To sell drinks, to sell food, to get butts in chairs, right? So they're going to hire a person that gets butts in chairs. It doesn't matter whether that's a guitar or a band or bagpipes. Whatever sells drinks and sells food, they're going to book. Because they don't care what the music is. They just care that they're making money. Right? So you have to demonstrate to them that you're the person that's going to get butts in chairs. So how do you do that? You have to prove it to them. And usually that's with your EPK. Okay. I want to play my album live with a band that allows me to have the sounds from my album, but not have it played the same way like the album. From I want to play my album live with a band that allows me to have the sounds from my album, but not have it played the same way like the album start to finish. What's the most logical way to go about this? In other words, more room for jamming in certain sections. So I'm sorry, I don't. Oh, is there more? There's more stuff down here. I made a pop album that's much weirder and funkier than anything I've heard in the music scene in my city or radio.
Tori, can I jump in and maybe clarify?
That would be great because I think I guess where I'm confused with is it like you already have the album and you're wanting to play it live, or you're wanting to record an album live off the floor? That's what I'm getting.
I think it's that they have an album and they want to like recreate the album, but not completely. Like they want to adapt it to like a live scenario. And so like what are some tips from like taking something, a recorded version of something and
Oh,
transferring it to live and like including more like
okay.
solo
Yeah, that's what it
sections.
is. Okay, use
I
stems.
think so.
Use stems that give you flexibility. So for those of you who don't know what stems are, very often artists will play, for lack of better words, with like backing tracks, and they'll still have a full band. But let's say a song has like another synth thing, or like a lead line or something that the members of the live band can't cover, right? Or even just like pads in the background or whatever. We very frequently use stems that fill in those things in the background, and usually the drummer will have a click going on as well to keep everything on time. So you can use stems and customize them so that if you like when you're working with your drummer, so that you can turn the stem off, right? So like we'll play through this section true to form, and then we're gonna have 24 bars of free space where you can do whatever you want, right? Usually, like you can even have the stems on a drum pad or on like an actual clicker or something, so that after you finish a section, you can click it over to the next section of the song. So that's a very common thing. But just look at using stems and working with your band to adapt them to give you however much freedom you're looking to have, whether that be like adding in extra bars, right, being able to go back to a previous section, whatever that would look like. And then you just work as a team to figure out how to communicate with each other to figure out what you're going to do, so that whoever is running the stems on your show, it's usually the drummer or somebody on keys or something like that, that can trigger it accordingly. That's exactly what you're going to do. A lot of people do it. Really easy thing to do. Okay. I struggle to find co-writers, co-producers, collaborators who I connect with creatively and with whom I share similar sensibilities. Where can I find people who are into the same kinds of music as I'm into? That can be a hard thing to do. The answer is go to all of the places and meet more people. You know, it may take 100 people to find the one that's worth working with, that you want to work with, or like who you drive with. So go to more places, meet more people, shake more hands. You increase your likelihood of being in the right room with the right person at the right time. Also look at like, I mean, everybody who's in the music industry loves music, right? And is or once was a musician themselves. It's like a rule. So go to like try and find other bands that you like that do maybe not perfectly what you do, but something that's kind of like it, right? And just go to all those places and meet all those people. You can also connect with people virtually. Look at like bands around the world that maybe do something that is like what you do, and engage with that stuff. Yeah, it's all about being in all of the places, meeting all of the people. Yeah, I burned a lot of bridges because a lot of people I used to work with and be friends with turned out to be bigots against me. And I certainly had enough of a hand in it. How can I move forward to be better than I was before without constantly fearing being isolated forever? That's a big question. I think that, and now we're getting a little bit away from the music stuff and more into like the person stuff, but it's all very interconnected, isn't it? What I can say within the context of the music industry is that you never want to speak poorly of anyone, to anyone. When if I was talking to, or what's the best way? Usually I'll use a person as an example. Z, you're the moderator here, so I'll use you. Let's say Z and I are having a conversation, and I bring up the fact that I don't like another person. Let's call it this Clive. We don't have a Clive this year in our group. I don't think we've ever had a person named Clive that's a friend. So Z and I are talking, and I go, wow, Clive is a real piece of work. He said this to me and this and that, and I don't like him one bit. I think he should take a long walk off a short cliff. And then Z knows how I feel about Clive, but also who's to say that if Z does or says something I don't like, that I'm not going to go and talk to Zoe and say, wow, Z, I don't like, because they should take a long walk off a short cliff. There's no way to know, right? And if you just like in every other environment, if you build a reputation for shit talking, everybody is always going to be scared about saying anything or doing anything around you for fear of, you doing the same thing about them. So a good rule of thumb is to never speak badly of anybody. That's not to say to communicate when somebody is problematic, right? To not do that. But what tends to happen in this industry is you say things without saying them, right? So I'd be having a conversation with Z, and Z might ask me, oh, have you ever worked with so-and-so? I'm thinking about hiring them on as my drummer. And I'll go, I have worked with them. Yes. Right? And there's something that's communicated there, right? That's how we tend to function in this industry. The lack of saying something speaks volumes. But as a general rule, you never say anything bad about anyone to anyone. I know that I've also been in an environment, I remember it was Canadian Music Week one year. I was with a fellow artist who was a former friend, and we got on the elevator to head down to the convention floor. There was already somebody in the elevator. I knew who that person was in the elevator. I knew of them, but I did not know them personally. They happened to be the CEO of a very important, large company within the industry that represents songwriters. And I got in the elevator and didn't say anything because that'd be super weird. And this other artist started talking very poorly about somebody who happened to be a songwriter on that person's roster. And the person who was in the elevator before us just kind of stood there quietly and listened, and the person in front of them had no idea who was behind them, and went on and on and on and on and on, and made themselves look very foolish. So best to just err on the side of caution and keep your thoughts to yourself. I think that's the biggest thing I would say that's music industry related, in terms of ways to keep on everybody's good side to the best of your ability in a way that pertains to the music industry. As a songwriter, what opportunities are there for me in the industry if I only want to write and not necessarily perform as much? There are many songwriters that aren't artists. Focus on being a great songwriter. You'll still need to perform in some contexts, probably, like writers' rounds, but it's all other songwriters in that environment. Nobody's going to judge you. So I'd like go to the environment where the songwriters are, right? And get really good at writing other songs. And if you're a killer songwriter, but you don't want to be an artist, find artists to write with, because they'll go and perform your song. And then you don't have to. There you go. Is there any ways that you found your music career benefit to your career in biochemistry? Oh yeah. Everything that I have done in this industry has completely fed into the other half of my weird Miley Cyrus Hannah Montana life. My public speaking, massive, right? Like making presentations, reading people, right? Assessing situations, even like as funny enough, being as a PhD student, I have to do a surprisingly large amount of graphic design. That's really useful. Video editing, I have to do that. Making pretty figures, yep. Writing effectively, concisely, absolutely. Like pretty much everything except for literally singing and playing an instrument has translated over entirely to my career in biochemistry. I made a pop album that's much weirder and funkier than anything I've heard. Made a pop album that's much weirder and funkier than anything I've heard in the music scene, my city, or on the radio. How can I still find the right box without having to change my sound? When you say the right box, you mean like genre? You want to just give, yeah, I don't know. Okay. More or less. So, I think a thing to remember is that like categories are constructs, right? Like genres are just labels that we put on things to group like things together. That's not actually real. The amount of things that are labeled alternative that are just didn't fit into any other box, massive. So I think that a good thing to do would, well, and you said it's a pop album, so just put it in pop. There are so many different styles of pop, right? Like it doesn't have to just be like adult contemporary pop for it to count as pop. All pop is valid. It brings me to a funny memory. So there was one year, I think it was 2019, we were holding auditions for this program in person, and there was an artist who went up to audition, and another person on the panel, they played their audition and they were fantastic. Really impressed me. And another person on the panel asked, like, so what genres do you play primarily? Like what so we know that you do this, what else do you do? And this person was like, a rock person, right? And they were like, oh yeah, no, I do a whole bunch of genres. I do grunge rock, I do punk rock, I do like, and listed off like 12 things that ended in rock. And it was just the funniest thing. That was also was a person who said, and then they ended it with, I pretty much do everything except country music. I hate country music with a burning passion. And then that person went, Tori is a country musician. And they went, oh, I take it back. And I went, no, live it, mean it. It was probably one of the hands down funniest auditions I've ever seen. It was great. Me and another person on the panel were like country musicians. So also great tip for life. If there's any way to know who one of your jurors might be for anything, probably a good idea to like read up on that situation just a little bit. Do as much recon as you can within reason. Or someone will talk about you on a Zoom panel 4 years later. On that note, how do I still find the right box without having to change my sound? Don't change your sound for anything. First of all, do what works for you. The people who like it will come and will stay. As long as you put this stuff in out to the world in a way that they can find it, which is why I love TikTok so much. That algorithm is so powerful. Like, if you're a person that likes making polka music and jumping on your left foot wearing the color green, you put that on the internet and enough people who like one of those three things will engage with it, then it will start auto feeding you to people who like people who make polka music while jumping on their left foot wearing green. Not purple, not blue, green. Like, it's so powerful. It's like literally will hand you to your exact perfect target demo on a silver platter. So do exactly the thing that you like doing. Don't compromise your genre for anyone. And if you make it accessible to people in environments that, like TikTok, that will spoon feed you to the people who will love you, you will carve out a really nice niche right there. But it takes the persistence of actually doing it over and over and over and over and over and over again to actually do that. And I think like Fura, I use as the perfect example of being really consistent with who you are, the sound that you make, and what you do. And if you do that over and over and over and over and over again for years, you will carve out a really, really nice area in a demographic like that's built for you, that's made for you. So that's what I would say to that. Outside of your work with the co-op, do you think you'll get involved in music again in a different capacity than before? Outside of my work with the co-op, I mean, I would love to. I've had to, pretty much all of my time that I don't spend in the lab, I spend here doing stuff with you guys, or at my third job. But I would really love to get more time to do songwriting. Songwriting was always like the thing for me that I loved more than anything else. And I would love to have the opportunity to do that more and write with artists more. What was your songwriting process? Did you start with the lyrics or music first, or vice versa? What came naturally to you? I was always a lyrics person. The music always just kind of went with it, but lyrics were always my bread and butter. I remember, I think most of you, or at least some of you, will have met Lyric. at this point, who was another one of my guitar players for a good number of years there, and a very good friend of mine. And we tried to co-write once in our collective lives. When we were like 15, somewhere around there. And I was all lyrics and he was all music all of the way. And it did not work. It was like a massive train wreck. Because I was like, well, no, but this line, we do this thing. And he was like, but this guitar lick. And he was all about it, drove me crazy. That also speaks to you're not going to jive with every single person you write with. And it's all about finding the people who you work really well with and then work with them and never ever stop. And it's okay to find that you don't jive well with some people in terms of the creative process. That's very normal. So that's my songwriting process. How many hours per day do you think should be spent practicing your craft? I'm still getting used to performing for long periods of time, and sometimes when doing a CEP, my fingers will start to absolutely burn. Oh, that's a separate question. Okay, how many hours do you think per day do you think you should be practicing your craft? I can tell you that I used to practice for 4 hours a day. I'm not sure that that's reasonable, but that's what I did. I had 45 minutes of vocal exercises that I did every single day. And that wasn't like warm-ups before sure, that was like exercises for continuing to develop my craft. So that was 45 minutes. I used to practice really intentionally, like my guitar stuff. So I'm of the firm stance that sitting down and just playing songs does not count as practicing. Practicing has to be thoughtful and intentional. Just playing your repertoire does not count as practice. So I'd spend time doing that every day. I would practice live performance. So I literally had mirrors set up, like full body mirrors. And I printed out like a face of Oprah and a face of Zac Efron and like different people that I put in different spots in different mirrors. And I practiced standing there with my guitar, with my mic stand, having a really engaged stance and making prolonged eye contact with a specific person while I performed for like 30 seconds at a time before I broke eye contact and picked a new person. And I got really, really comfortable with that and built that muscle memory. That's something I did multiple times per week. Again, this is also a stamina and endurance thing. Don't go to the point that you're hurting yourself. But that's what I used to do. What do I think is reasonable? I think whatever you can afford to do, you should do. If you're going to take this seriously, like if you want to do this, if you want to be a professional musician, you have to not like prepare to do the job, you have to do the job. So you have to decide you're going to be a professional musician and then start acting like it. Right? So that looks like doing the vocal exercises every day, practicing your instrument every day, getting in the woodshed, doing scales, actively working to do better, investing in your craft. And if that means going and taking lessons, do it. Right? And so it's whatever time you can afford to do that, do. And then, okay, so another question here. I'm still getting used to performing for long periods of time, and sometimes when doing a CEP, my fingers will start to absolutely burn. Do you have any tips for soothing them in that moment so you can continue with less pain? Take more frequent breaks, right? You don't have to play for 45 minutes straight. You don't have to play for an hour straight. You certainly don't have to play for like 2 or 3 hours straight. Rest and recovery is important. Whenever I did have that happening, I used to ice occasionally. A lot of it, again, is just like building up the calluses so that doesn't happen. So also just having the patience with yourself while you're building up your calluses. Don't push yourself to the point that you're hurting yourself. When it starts to hurt, stop. I'm going to school for graphic design solely as a means to not have to wait tables for the rest of my life. I know I'm born to play shows and write songs. I don't want school to take away from my dreams. How can I ensure that I never take my eye off the prize regardless of school? I would constantly frame what you're doing in school with the context within the context of your art, right? So when you have the opportunity to do anything for graphic design where you have some freedom, make it about your business so that it's something you can use, right? Like constantly reframe what you're doing within school within the context of having your eyes on the prize. I mean, and on that note, here's another hot take. I don't believe in plan Bs. I only believe in plan A. So I think if you're going to do this, you have to decide that you're going to do it and not give yourself any option to fail. I'm a firm believer in that. Everybody who I've seen set up a plan B relied on it. It's a cushion. And I think people allow themselves to give up a lot easier when giving up is a choice. So, I mean, if you're going to school for something just to have a plan B, I would say, are you just deciding you're going to be a graphic designer then? Or is that a plan B? Right? Like, is that a, if the artist thing doesn't work out? Because I would ask you and say, like, aren't you kind of setting yourself up for the expectation that the artist thing isn't going to work out? How about we just decide, no, it's going to work out and I'm going to push relentlessly until it does? Because anything else is not an option. I'll leave you with that to think about. As someone who does not typically enjoy posting on your social media, what are your suggestions on staying relevant and gaining fans while not posting too much? Look at it as a part of your job, not a part of your life. Just because we have to use social media as a tool, as an artist, does not mean you have to use it as a person. So when you go on to post, go and post and then log right it back out. Even if that means that you have to delete Instagram and TikTok 3 times a day, do it. I mean, they might ban your account. I don't know. But I don't know how those things work. But I mean, just because you're using the tool doesn't mean that you have to engage with it as a consumer. So set up a time, set a timer and say, I've got 5 minutes to do this, to get my stuff posted, to reply to the comments, and then I'm done for the day. It's just a part of your job. It's no different than clocking into PayWorks. It's just a part of the job. So I try and reframe it because you're right now, you guys are used to engaging in this environment as a consumer, and you got to shake that because now you are on the inside of the bubble. You are the creator, not the consumer. You are the person pulling the strings behind the scenes, not the person watching the show out front. So use the tools from that headspace. You use the tool doesn't use you. No wonder I'm an academic now. What did I say that made me, I'm curious to know.
Your rigorous practice schedule sounds like
oh, my rigorous practice schedule?
Yeah, sounds like someone who was like born to study.
Oh, maybe. It's actually funny how lazy scientists are. We don't like doing things, so we invent entire new systems to have to do less work. It's really counterproductive. But thank you. Yes. Work smarter, not harder, except working smarter means inventing an entirely new system so that I can work slightly easier. It ends up costing a lot more money, time, and energy in the long run. But hey, look where it's gotten us. So people are always asking me what I will do if music doesn't work, and that I need to be realistic. I'm planning for it to work, and this is realistic for me. Yes! Yes, right there. Absolutely. This having a career in this industry is completely and entirely realistic. The only thing that is stopping you from having a career in this industry is you. Nobody else. If you want to do it, decide you're going to do it, and then gosh darn, just do it already. You are the only thing in the way of your path. It has never been easier to be an independent musician. You can get funding. You have access to free marketing tools at your fingertips, consuming your every being all day. Right? Like, you can do it. It is completely and entirely realistic as long as you commit to doing it. So, and if people say that that's unrealistic, then, oh, how nice it must be to be ignorant. You know this better than they do. So say, oh, thanks, Aunt Petunia. Thanks for your opinion. Please kindly screw off now. And do it, because I know you can do it. Here's the thing. If I didn't think you couldn't do it, you wouldn't be here. Because I don't know if you guys noticed this, but it takes a lot of time and energy and resources to run this program. And if I don't think that you are capable of doing it, you wouldn't be here. Okay? Because this is exhausting. And frankly, I have no time for it. And yet I am here because I know that you're going to use it wisely. So if you're here for a reason. There are many people who auditioned who are not here because it was obvious that they were not in it for the right reasons, and that I or the other jurors on the panel did not think that they had what it takes. Okay? I think you can do it. So it's just up to you now. You just got to get up and you got to do it. And get over yourselves and just do it. There you go. What kind of performance was your favorite to experience? Oh, okay, I know this immediately. My favorite thing to do as a performer was to go to writers' rounds, specifically at the Moonshine Cafe in Oakville. It was magic. It was absolute magic. All of my friends were there that were co-writers, and I brought all my new material, and there's magic in that room. I swear. I think it was Wednesday night, NSAI songwriters rounds were my lifeblood. Seriously. Because I am all about the song. I don't care about the performance. Like, honestly, that was just like a part of it. The songwriting, oh man, that's the good stuff right there for me. And so being able to be in an environment where I got to play new material and get honest feedback on it, but also being able to play with my friends and jam with them, and also just be in a space where they all shared the backstory of their own work, and we all got to like work together, and oh, it was glorious, and I miss it every single day. There is nothing like it. If you can go to a writer's round, go, because God, it's like drugs. It's beautiful. Do you think it's better to teach yourself something like guitar or take lessons for it? I taught myself a lot of stuff. YouTube is great. YouTube is there. So here's what I always did that I found was the most effective use of my resources. I taught myself up to the point that I wasn't actively growing or progressing at that point. Then I would get a lesson from somebody and they would give me a bunch of stuff to work on. And then I would go away and work on it. And then when I'd gotten all of that down, I would book another lesson. So I didn't do like weekly lessons because A, I didn't have the money for it. And B, that was not a good use of my time. I didn't need somebody to just keep me accountable in practicing. I needed somebody to make me stop because I would practice until my fingers bled. And there are people that can vouch for that. So I think that when you get to the point where you can't do it by yourself anymore and you're not actively progressing and growing, then find a teacher who is genuinely good at what they do, right? Like, I was very fortunate to right off the bat have Elaine Overholt as my vocal coach, who she is truly an expert, and is kind of the person in Toronto. And she took me on at 13, and I used to have a lesson with her every month. And I would go and meet with her for an hour, and she would look at stuff and give me, you got to work on this, you're going to do this for this, you're going to work on this for this, you're going to do this for that. And I would take it all away, and I would go and I would practice it, and I would nail it, and then I would come back in a month, and she would go, okay, that's good, you're doing this wrong still, so let's approach this way. Here's a new thing and a new thing and a new thing and a new thing. I'll see you in a month. Versus like going to get vocal coaching from somebody who wanted to meet every week and would like give me a Disney song to learn and then come back next Tuesday and then give them another $80. Didn't work for me. And so I really benefited from working with Elaine. So that's my thoughts. How sad it must not to be a dreamer. True. Sick of being asked if I'm learning about music to be a teacher. There's nothing wrong with being a music teacher. Music teachers are great. They're excellent. Oh, they're a huge reason of why I'm sure many of us are here. But don't feel like you have to be. That's up to you. The moonshine is a dream for songwriting grounds. Yes. I spent my entire week vacation in Nashville going to hole-in-the-wall venues for songwriter rounds. So epic. Kayla, okay, the next time you're in Nashville, I'm going to tell you my favorite place in Nashville. My friend Fred owns it. It is called Rhino Books. It's just off Music Row. So Fred is one of my, I love co-writing with him. He's like just a monster and also just an incredible human being. And he has this bookstore that he has built and had for many years. You walk in, there are books everywhere, floor to ceiling. There's a cat that lives in the bookstore, and it's just piles. I mean, it smells like dust, but oh my God, that place is magic. And his songwriting studio is upstairs. It's the entire upper floor, and he has like a little apartment up there. And he'll like, you go into the bookstore and you go up there, and actually, hang on. Oh, I have it. 1 second. Where is it? This is something that Fred gave me for my 15th birthday. So my first time playing at the Bluebird Cafe, my debut there was on my 15th birthday, which was very special. And that year for my birthday, he gave me this. It was the second or third time I wrote with him, and he was like, it's your birthday, that's crazy. And he like went downstairs, he started rummaging through a bunch of stuff. And then he came back like 5 minutes later, and he's like, this is for you. Hang on to this. You're gonna need it for when your internet goes out. Because I would have like Rhyme Zone up and stuff, and he always made fun of me for it. And so he gave me an actual rhyming dictionary for when my technology failed me. And it's one of my most prized possessions. And I love him to death. Fred Kohler. So Rhino Books, you gotta go. It's like one of my favorite places on earth. And is that all of the, one more question, then we'll call it there. Someone who hired me for a gig invited me to participate in a writer circle that he runs. He said he'd send an email with further info, but I never received one from him. Should I email him to reach out and ask about it? I don't know, maybe since he changed his mind since it was in a moment asked, but he did seem genuine. Reach out, it doesn't hurt. As long as you don't like email him relentlessly and be a pain in the butt, I don't see anything wrong with following up. Persistent people succeed. Okay, I think that's all the questions. I think we did it. Hopefully this was somewhat useful for some of you, I hope. If not, I apologize for wasting your time, or perhaps next time listen better. One or the other. Thank you so much for joining me today. And for the people who are in the Zoom call that I can see, I'll see you tomorrow. And the day after that. And probably the day after that. Because I have no boundaries. And Z, I'll throw it over to you. Thanks everyone so much for your attention. I'm just shutting up. I'm shutting up.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here, Tori. I think a lot of people got their questions asked, and I think it was helpful for a lot of people. It was definitely helpful for me as well. So yeah, thank you for being here, and I guess good night, everybody.
Good night, y'all.